Your pages have numbers, by the way, which is unusual for me, as you know. And so let's start at page 4. It looks like that. And I presume that that probably all of you, well, let me do it the other way. Is there anybody in here who has not read Think and Grow Rich? Elliot, really? You're kidding me. Did you raise your hand too?
I haven't read it all.
Well, it ain't that thick. I mean, you know. I mean, I know you're skinny, but you got to go to the bathroom once a day, don't you? You know, a couple pages every day. I mean, in a month or so, you're done, you know, unless you're stopped up. I mean, gee whiz. Jim Rohn used to talk about recommending the book to people when it was still only in hardcover and have people tell him, well, you know, I'm going to wait till it comes out in paperback. May I make a recommendation? Yeah. How many have read Hill's other stuff? The Laws of Success that it came from, Grow Rich with Peace of Mind. Not so many. Best book of the bunch. You should get your hands on that one. It's the one he wrote latest in life, and it's probably Grow Rich with Peace of Mind. It's probably the best of the bunch. How about Succeed and Grow Rich Through Persuasion? Oh, hardly any. Isn't that interesting?
Is that by Hill?
Napoleon Hill. It was written for a company called Holiday Magic, which was what today we would call multi-level, what the regulatory folks call pyramid scheme. It was written for a guy by the name of William Penpatrick at Holiday Magic as a combination sales tool for the distributors and a credibility device for Penpatrick and Holiday Magic, because he's all through the book. You don't know, looking at it, that it was written for Holiday Magic. That, in fact, was the point. As an aside, by the way, you can trace a lot of the self-improvement industry back to that. Zig was in Holiday Magic. Werner Erhard was in Holiday Magic before he was called Werner Erhard. Jim Rohn, who of course essentially birthed Tony. And so you can trace the lineage of a lot of this back to Penpatrick. Anyway, so you're all familiar with Hill's work. Oh, and Phil brought me, which I'll show you later because there's something in it I want to quote. Phil Alexander, who's all the way in the back next to the camera. Phil is a great finder of ancient artifacts. And he's got 2 copies of the Napoleon Hill magazine from 1921, which sold for 25 cents a copy, by the way, and was one of the many Hill business ventures that lasted a relatively short period of time, so there's not a lot of editions, but it's a real interesting thing to see. What a lot of people are not real cognizant of, and I want to be careful about this because I don't want to in any way invalidate anything in the books. But like so many of us, there's a vast difference between identifying what works, putting what works down in a book, and then actually doing it. And Hill spent the latter years of his life fundamentally broke. And a lot of people don't know that. But at one point in time, I remember seeing a classified ad in Success magazine where his original typewriter was for sale for $50 or best bid above 50. Napoleon Hill was basically rescued late in life by Clem Stone and put to work as a sales trainer. 4 combined insurance companies of America. And that was like pretty much the last things he did in his career before he retired. And Stone basically kind of made him economically whole. But when Stone got him, he was basically broke. By the way, there's another product you might want. Nightingale Conant has, and they don't advertise it, but they have a set of videos of Napoleon Hill, the title of which completely escapes me. But what they really are, they're black and white, and what they really are films of the sales training classes at Clem Stone's insurance company. And I think they're the only video available with Hill on them. Phil, you can probably find a set on eBay, God help us all, for $18.72 or something, but I think they're $300 if you buy them from Nightingale. And undoubtedly one of the reasons Nightingale doesn't advertise them much is their underwear tightens up at the thought of asking anybody for $300. But they do have them, and they will grudgingly let you buy them if you pursue them. And I recommend them. They're really fascinating. Anyway, Hill, who, more, according to Inc. magazine, more self-made millionaires put Think and Grow Rich on their list of books that have influenced them than any other book other than the Bible. And just about everybody in my circle, I mean, you couldn't walk into one of my clients' offices and not find the whole library. And so here's the guy who wrote, if you will, the Bible about prosperity, who winds up broke. And isn't that disturbing? And why is that? And Clem Stone, who was inspired by Napoleon Hill's work, winds up very, 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 very rich. Stone finally, he passed away not too long ago at the ripe old age of 212 or something. And, basically, he was too mean to die. I'm sure that was one of those funerals where there were people there out of respect, and there were people there who wanted to make sure. I met him and spent a little time with him when we did the Think and Grow Rich infomercial at Guthrie Ranker, and he was then way up there and tough as nails. But he and now the Napoleon Hill Foundation, which he created, own all the intellectual property rights to all of the Hill stuff, and they believe they own the rights to, like, any word that might somewhere have been said once by Napoleon Hill. They have a very aggressive law firm. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I know. Anybody in here deal with that yet besides me? You have, haven't you? Yeah. Yeah, Phil, you have. They actually will come after you for using the word success or philosophy. And pretty aggressively, too. But they and Disney, I think, are the two most aggressive protectors of intellectual property on the planet. Anyway, so Stone winds up really, really, really rich. And Hill winds up really, really, really poor. Although for a brief period in his time in his life, he was loaded. He was what the Millionaire Next Door guys call, what the financial planning industry calls, high income underinvested. Meaning Rolls Royces, overbuilt mansions that when they are sold, they sell for 20% of what they cost to build, that kind of stuff. Having been one of those myself, I have some empathy for him. Anyway, he winds up broke. Stone winds up rich. And when I first heard this, it was disturbing to me. And then my curiosity was enormously aroused. And one of the things that we'll talk about a little bit today and wind up with, what I'll end with today, is the paramount and primary reason I believe that that Stone was rich and Hill was poor. But one is that Napoleon Hill had a philosophy built upon mostly observation, research, interviews. You guys all know the story, which, like all stories, incidentally, is slightly romanticized. But predominantly through observation, he had a philosophy. Stone took it and applied it, and the key word is applied or application, in an environment where it had a reasonable opportunity to produce money. And there's a real practical lesson there, which we'll come back to. The first half of the day, I thought we'd spend on somebody asked a question, it's in the questions, the stack of questions, about me often referring to metaphysical stuff as, airy-fairy, sort of in a joking, or they took it as a derogatory manner, but you use it. And I took a class once in metaphysics, by the way. I failed the final exam. I was caught cheating, looking into the soul of the person next to me. That's for you. You can use it. I've tried to approach these things from a practical standpoint. And I find that a whole lot of the people who talk about this stuff, a whole lot of the people I've read, a whole lot of the people that I've met, their flaw in the ointment, in my opinion, is they are in, Dick Sutphin used to call them the sackcloth and ashes crowd. They're into every part of the metaphysics except practical application. And, you can't, I had an early mentor who said you can't eat philosophy. And you can't go down to the bank and put philosophy on a bank deposit slip. He's absolutely right. And so practical application is critically important. But there are some conceptual things. And so I thought the first half of the day we'd talk about some conceptual things. During the course of the day, I know there's a couple of people came up this morning, again, impressed me. I know there's immense curiosity about my personal sort of rituals and use of these things, which I'll be happy to tell you. But a lot of what I have to tell you is also from observation. One of the neat things about the way I've made my living is I've got to hang around with a whole lot of very affluent people, most of whom did not start with much and have built large incomes, and in many cases, some of them just large incomes and no wealth, but in many cases, a great deal of wealth. And I tried to figure it out before this seminar. I actually went through old client lists and current client lists, and I finally stopped at 130 some odd people that I know for a fact are in the double-digit millions to $10 million net worth range, who pretty much were at zero or just a decent income but no real wealth at one point in time. And so I've spent a lot of time with 130 plus of these people, more time with some than others. And in recent years, I've seen a fair number of people. We commented on it yesterday. Those of you that weren't here yesterday, the difference between the growth that has occurred, and this is a compliment, by the way, for many of you, the growth that has occurred in many of the people who are at this alumni event from as recently as the prior alumni event is striking. And the growth is in two areas. It's in mechanical or technical skill. I mean, the effectiveness of their marketing, what they had to show versus what they had shown us before, the improvement in their copywriting skills, the improvement in their ability to craft offers, all of that is really quite remarkable. And there are any number of people in this room who've gone in the last 2 or 3 years from modest incomes to very big incomes. A number of people in this room who their current monthly income was their annual income. That's, there's commonalities there too. You watch enough of them, you notice a few things. The other kind of growth is attitudinal, which is a little harder to put your finger on, but it's a closed loop. So I thought we'd do the conceptual stuff this morning, and then the practical application stuff this afternoon. And if we have time, which I suspect we will, a bunch of you have turned in questions. This time I've looked at them. And thrown out a few, none of which rival the first question of yesterday. So, you should be on page number 5. And page 5 and 6, actually. People actually think, and get ingrained in their heads, that there's some kind of zero-sum game going on here. That money taken from this person and moved to this person enriches this person at the expense of that person. And certainly the liberal politicians either believe it or pander to it, one or the other. But a whole lot of people have it operating at a beneath the surface level that affects a lot of what they do, and inhibits them in a lot of different ways. What they'll charge, for example, who they'll ask for money. Everybody in direct sales. Zig has a true story. Glenn Turner has a true story. I've got a true story. Everybody who's ever done direct sales much. By the way, is Bill Driscoll here today, or did Bill leave? Oh, Bill's here? Okay. I'll bet you got a story. Because what's the current price point for an average house for a fire alarm installation?
1,700, 1,800.
Okay. What, 10 years ago, 800? 900?
Yeah, probably 900.
Yeah, okay. So 10 years ago, my frame of reference for a fire alarm sale, a vacuum cleaner sale, a water purifier sale, a pot and pan sale, about $800. 20 years ago, 500, right? Yeah. And now you guys have got it up to 1,700. So this salesman, by the way, if any of you ever, let's see, how many of you have had a pot and pan pitch made to you in your house? God, you guys are deprived. How many of you have had a vacuum cleaner pitch made to you in your house? Okay, there's more of that. How many of you have had a fire alarm pitch made to you in your house? Oh, good. Hey, guys, somebody's out there. Okay, now how many of you have done any one of the three for a living? All right, well, every one of you has this story. All right? Because, let's do books, too. Encyclopedia. Okay, there you go. Okay. Every one of you who's done this has some version of this story. You've seen it. And now it's $1,700. Of course, it's probably even more profound. So the fire alarm salesman with the stuffed Dalmatian under his arm and the crying dog film and marches into the house and discovers that he is in a place of relative poverty, at least by his standards. He is sitting across the table. The two kids are in on a threadbare carpet in the living room. They probably have a good television, but pretty much everything else in the house, is obviously hand-me-down, beat up, falling apart, springs sticking up out of the couch seat. You just clearly know that these people, aren't doing well. Conversationally, you discover, Papa hadn't worked in 4 months, and You know, the kid's got some kind of problem that causes big medical bills, and on and on and on and on. And the salesperson becomes increasingly queasy about closing these people on the $1,700 fire alarm sale, or the what's a vac now? $1,700, huh? On the $1,700 vacuum cleaner. And so the salesperson becomes increasingly queasy about this, and in many cases will not close. He'll deliberately throw the game at the end and toss that one aside and get out of there. Okay? And everybody then who has done this for any period of time has the person who rises up in the middle of the weak, wimpy attempt to throw the ball game close and is almost offended that they are not trying to sell it to them. Glenn tells a story of actually being chased by somebody who was mad that he wouldn't sell him a sewing machine. Zig has a similar pot and pan story. If you've heard Zig's story about the indoor plumbing customer that was saving up the money to put in indoor plumbing, and then he backed off and the people were annoyed and they really wanted the pots and pans.
Pump still works.
Huh?
Pump still works.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They put indoor plumbing in next year, but you know, got to get the pots now. And of course, the pots pay for themselves, you know, because they say, you know. So really, they're free after 24 months of what you saved on utilities. The queasiness about price, about who somebody is selling to, about their ability to pay, their ability to afford it. Anytime you start to make those decisions for other people, it really reflects more about what's going on internally with you than it does with anything else. And the other thing to remember is that people who are without money that you perceive to be disadvantaged for one reason or another, and you question whether you should sell them something. Regardless of whether you get any of their money or not, they're going to be without money next week too. The reason they're without money has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with your existence, nor does it have to do with the way money works in the real world. It has to do with them. And whether you take it, somebody else takes it, the liquor store takes it, the church takes it, whoever takes it, I promise you somebody's getting it. Because if they're without money now, they're going to be without money again. And most of them are going to be without money permanently because they never fix the things that we're talking about that have to do with whether or not you have money. And it happens at all levels. I mean, we have people selling $50,000 programs to doctors. At one time, Tracy's, I get all confused with familial relationships. Is Rod your uncle? Yeah, okay. I mean, Rodney and I were selling a $36,000 program to doctors in the early 80s. And at least 70% of the doctors who bought couldn't afford to pay attention. I mean, let alone a $36,000 program. But when you're selling help to people, when you're a success merchant, there's only two buyers. There's the already extremely successful who don't need it, who buy everything because they practice the principle of the slight edge, and there's the starving and desperate looking for a life raft. The middle is not the market. And so if you only took the rich, you would starve. And so the queasiness has to go away. You got this doctor who just had his car repossessed, is having trouble keeping the lights on in the office, and is getting more calls from bill collectors than he is from new patients, and you're going to walk him down to 4 different finance companies and blast 6 of his credit cards to get $36,000 from him to put him into a management program. You can't have any queasiness. You can't have any reluctance. And you have to understand that the reason he's where he is has nothing to do with you, the guy who came before you, the guy who came after you. It all has to do with him. And there's plenty of money to go around. Nobody's ever go run out of dough. And there's no excuse to be broke in America. Anybody can tomorrow start from zero, and they can get a bucket and a sponge, or they can, and these chiropractors. I mean, I know lawyers who are broke. Can you imagine this? I mean, I'm serious. They get out of school with a license to steal money. Okay? And some of these people can't cut it. Well, it has nothing to do with any shortages. It has nothing to do with any money anybody takes from them. It totally has to do with them. There's plenty of dough. And now we have all the recession stuff going on, and the media is desperately trying to sell everybody the idea that things are bad and are going to get worse for a variety of reasons. And so some people will believe that now that there's a shortage of money because there's a war. Other people think there's a shortage of money because there's a tax cut. Other people think there's no shortage of money. There's money everywhere. Just walk around, look around, And you got to get past the zero-sum game idea that when somebody gives up money to you, that you've profited and they've lost, and there's less money over here now than there is over here. The money just keeps replenishing. It's always there. It's just some people don't see it, and some people aren't smart enough to bend over and pick it up. But it's always there, and there's plenty of it. The other big thing to get is there's mountains of dumb money out there. Okay? And so if you want to, you can more than satisfy your needs just dipping into the pond of dumb money. One of my favorites, this is, I forget what catalog this is from. It's not Neiman Marcus, which you usually find this stuff in Neiman's. It's not Neiman Marcus, but here's, I don't know what catalog this is. Gentleman's Domain. This is owned by Frontgate. This thing's been in for 3 catalogs. They ain't wasting the space to have fun. Where's the price point here? The Eli Bridge Company in Jacksonville, Illinois. Now give these guys points if they initiated this for getting themselves in a catalog. The Eli Bridge Company builds amusement park rides, like the famous Scrambler, which is this thing. Okay? They've been building them for 100 years. And now, for only $300,000, they'll put that thing in your backyard. They'll build you a 67-foot-high, 16-seat Ferris wheel. You'll need a 220-volt power outlet. Gee, no shit. And since it weighs almost 20 tons, you may want to have the patio checked out before getting started. By the way, that's right, you saw the Shed Shop infomercial. The happy couple with the 2 sheds in their backyard, the his and her sheds, they're both retired and they're on Social Security, and he's got 1 small pension. They're totally on fixed incomes. 2 sheds. 1 ain't enough. The guy with the shed and the big pond in his backyard, you remember him? Oh, you should have heard his sob story. If you heard the sob story first, you would never think this guy's going to pop for 20 grand of landscaping, a koi pond, and a shed in his backyard. I mean, the poor soul hadn't got 2 nickels. His whole family doesn't have 2 nickels. But somebody sold him a koi pond, and he likes his koi pond. For a $75,000 upsell, you can get the mobile model. These guys are funny. That folds for compact storage in any 80-foot-long garage. You can take care of this, by the way, on 3 easy payments. Nokia has a new line of cell phones. And I know there are some of you in the room who like the latest doohickey. So if you don't have this, you got to have it. It's made out of gold and platinum, and it sells for $20,000. It is an experiment in exquisite design and craftsmanship. Oh, it's also large, because obviously you don't want to have a $20,000 phone and have somebody not see it. Remember, years ago, a friend of mine got rather, I thought, oversized breast implants and began to dress rather provocatively, and her answer to that was, if you buy a new Jaguar, you don't leave it in the garage with a tarp on it. Anyway, this oversized phone, here's how they explain this. There's a size to proportion balance that has a calming effect. Yeah, $20,000 phone. I had a client that sold a $3,000 coffee pot. I mean, that's